This is a map of Durban, South Africa. Here lies Chatsworth, a crowded Indian neighborhood. 64% of people live here in poverty, without running water or electricity. Just a few miles away lies Berea, a white-only neighborhood. Residents lived in big houses, lush gardens, and plenty of good schools. While the divide between white and black South Africans is well known, the story of its Asian communities is often overlooked. How exactly were they treated? This is the story of Asians during apartheid and how they were used as a political tool by the government. For decades, South Africa was under apartheid, a system of racial segregation where a white minority controlled where non-white people could live, work, and even which public benches or beaches they could use. Non-white South Africans were denied all the basic rights, such as voting, land ownership, or access to good schools and hospitals. One law made apartheid visible on the ground, the Group Areas Act of 1950. The government divided every city into racial zones: black, colored, Asian, or white. If your ID didn't match the zone, you could be evicted. In this way, more than 3.5 million people were forced out of their homes and pushed to racial zones on the outskirts of cities. So where did Asians fit in this system? In South Africa, the vast majority of Asians were of Indian descent. Many lived in multiracial, vibrant neighborhoods like Ghetto Manor, where Indian, black, and colored South Africans lived side by side. When the Group Areas Act criminalized this, the Indian minority was forcibly removed to designated Indian neighborhoods, such as Chatsworth, where living conditions were terrible. These areas did receive slightly more funding than black neighborhoods, resulting in somewhat better housing, roads, and schools. But they still lagged far behind the white-only neighborhoods. On the other hand, the Chinese community in South Africa was far smaller, numbering around 10 to 20,000. They were initially labeled as Asians, but later as colored, facing roughly the same treatment as Indians. Yet over the course of apartheid, the Chinese slowly gained more rights. By the late 1970s, they had won many of the privileges reserved for whites. The Chinese community managed this success through their small size and by portraying themselves as hardworking, law-abiding citizens. Instead of protesting the existing social order, they manipulated the apartheid system to their advantage, leveraging their perceived ties to Taiwan, one of South Africa's few remaining anti-communist allies. Yet in reality, the majority of Chinese South Africans trace their roots back to mainland China. The last and smallest group were citizens of Hong Kong, Japan, and actual Taiwanese nationals. They were treated very differently. Many were given the status of honorary white. This label allowed certain non-white people to live in white areas, use white-only facilities, and bypass racial segregation laws, mostly for economic or diplomatic reasons. So basically, the government was saying, "You're not white, but we will treat you like white because it's convenient for us." Japanese got this status in the early 1960s, followed by Hong Kong citizens and Taiwanese in the 80s. At that time, Taiwan was one of South Africa's few remaining diplomatic allies, while Hong Kong and Japan were key trading partners. Even some black athletes or diplomats were given honorary white status, but never on the same scale as Japanese, Koreans, and Hong Kong citizens. These groups enjoyed rights denied to local Chinese and especially to Indians who had lived in South Africa for generations. Some Chinese families were treated like whites during the 1970s, but only on a case-by-case basis, and sometimes simply because they were mistaken for Japanese or Taiwanese. Unlike those groups, the Chinese community was not officially recognized as honorary whites. Indians almost never received such treatment and remained segregated in Indian neighborhoods, which clearly exposed the hypocrisy of apartheid laws. This history shows something uncomfortable. The racial laws of apartheid weren't truths, they were tools. Tools that bent the moment money, diplomacy, or power was on the table. Different Asian minorities were placed unequally and inconsistently in South African society. They could be not white one day and white the next, depending on what suited the regime. It brings to mind the chilling words of Nazi leader Hermann Göring in 1934, when told a favorite Munich art dealer was a non-Aryan. He said, "I shall decide who is a Jew around here." That's apartheid in a sentence. Race defined not by color, but by convenience. If this story sparked your thinking, give it a like and don't miss our deep dive on the geopolitical situation between Iran and Israel. Curious for more? Hit the subscribe button and join Cur.